Now we have a story about two things you might not normally put together.
Yeah, we're talking about traffic engineering and the First Amendment. Our Dan Tilkin has this important fight over this odd pairing of topics, Dan.
Right. This has to do with whether the state of Oregon owns a particular word and whether you can get in trouble for using it like a man in Beaverton did.
Traffic, 26 westbound.
This free speech story starts on the streets of Beaverton, where no city in our entire region hands out tickets faster, and thousands are for people running red lights.
Then I have the cameras. I have actually 3 cameras.
And this man had something to say about the cameras and the math formula that determines if the camera flashes and you get a ticket. So decades and decades and decades this has been being used incorrectly?
Yes.
That blows my mind.
Well, I can prove it.
So should we do some right-hand turns? This demonstration is part of the 3-year obsession of Swedish-born electronics expert Mats Jarlstrom after his wife got a ticket. He says some drivers get caught in a no-man's land when slowing down to turn right on green when the light suddenly turns yellow. Jarlstrom wants to tell the world about what he found, and so he shared his research at a conference of people who help set national traffic policy. It was pretty cool. But here's where things get interesting for an entirely different reason. Jarlstrom had taken his potential breakthrough to the state of Oregon's Board of Examiners for Engineering and asked them to change the way traffic engineers are trained on the formula for yellow lights. Instead, that board accused Jarlstrom of the unlicensed practice of engineering. Jarlstrom was fined and could face further punishment if he continues to call himself an engineer and talk about his research.
They turn it around and wants to kill the messenger.
Well, his frustration was felt all the way in Washington, D.C. by the people behind this website. The Institute for Justice, which fights for people's constitutional rights, will fight for Jarlstrom's.
The First Amendment guarantees to every American their right to debate anything and everything, from taxes to theology to traffic lights. And nobody needs a government permission slip to talk.
And today, their lawyers stood next to Jarlstrom after filing a federal lawsuit saying the state of Oregon cannot own the word engineer. You can see why the state would want to regulate who's an engineer. For instance, we all want to know the person who designed the bridge we drive over or the building we work in is qualified. But Jarlstrom's lawyers argue the government has no interest in restricting who can talk about or critique those engineering principles. It's not just Jarlstrom in this fight. The state went after others for using the E-word without passing the state's licensing tests, like Republican candidate for governor, Alan Alley.
I'm Alan Alley, and I'm an engineer.
He's still fighting his case. The reality is, most engineers, like Jarlstrom, are not licensed in this country, including many professors who teach engineering.
There are a lot of people being in this situation here in Oregon, and I'm proud to stand here to represent them. Very proud.
So the Institute for Justice is actually representing him for free, and they're not asking for any money. Jarlstrom says this is all about principle. Now, we tried talking to the State Board of Engineering about this. They said, well, there's a lawsuit, and we can't comment.
Well, I'm back to this. Most engineers don't have a license?
Right.
There's about 2 million engineers in this country, and only about 480,000 actually have licenses. At OSU, the engineering department, in the construction and civil engineering, I think it's 15 or 13 out of 45 have engineering licenses. They just don't, most engineers don't need them.
Interesting story.
Always interesting topics from our Dan Tilkin. You can see that story in full on coin.com, by the way.
I got really interested in this because my wife got a red light ticket. The original formula is limited to only straight through lanes. However, today it's misapplied to turning lanes where we need to slow down to maneuver safely. So we need to add an extra function, so to say, to enable those vehicles. A little extra time for the yellow. This is the board's order that I received to stop me from talking about traffic signals and where they fined me $500.
Oregon's engineering board told Matz it was illegal for him to critique traffic lights without a state-issued license. But under the First Amendment, every American has the right to critique the government, whether it's about traffic lights or anything else.
I had stated that I was a Swedish electronics engineer, but I based all the things from freedom of speech. I was just talking. That's literally what I did.
People like Matz aren't designing bridges, they're talking, and the state is punishing them for that. And it's not just Matz. Oregon's engineering board fined an activist for publicly criticizing a power plant. It fined a retired guy who wrote to complain about home water damage. It's even launched an investigation based on a political ad. This is a major First Amendment problem.
Anyone should be able to talk about the traffic signals, if they're too long or too short or anything, without being penalized.
His wife got a red light camera ticket. That's not interesting. How exactly yellow lights are timed? He has a math and science background, and he came up with an idea that the formula for calculating yellow lights is incomplete, and it can be improved upon. Now, Matz is an ordinary citizen. He's not going out and rewiring traffic lights. Instead, he talked about his ideas. He shared them publicly, and people wanted to hear what he had to say. Local media covered him, and he even presented at a conference on transportation in California. But all that came to a screeching halt when Oregon's Engineer Licensing Board, a state agency, told Matz that it was illegal for him to talk publicly about traffic lights without a license. According to the board, talking about engineering topics like traffic lights is the same as actually practicing engineering, like designing a bridge, which only state-licensed professional engineers can do. So for Matz, this meant that emailing local media, emailing his local sheriff about traffic lights, yielded a multi-year investigation and hundreds of dollars in fines. That's where this case comes in. A law that applies in that way is flatly unconstitutional. Matz isn't designing bridges, he's not designing highways. He's a concerned citizen. He wants to talk, and he has every right to do that. Under the First Amendment, you don't need to be a licensed lawyer to criticize the Supreme Court. You don't need to be a licensed landscape architect to run a gardening blog. And you don't need to be a licensed engineer to talk about traffic lights. Talking about the things that matter to us, or whatever they might be, can't be a crime. It's a constitutional right. Of course, this case is bigger than just Matz Jarlsson. Increasingly, private citizens in Oregon are being targeted by the Oregon Engineering Board simply for exercising their First Amendment rights. So, while the math behind traffic lights might get a little bit complicated at times, the principles at stake in this case could not be simpler. The First Amendment guarantees to every American their right to debate anything and everything, from taxes to theology to traffic lights. And nobody needs a government permission slip to talk. Now I'm going to let Matz Jarlsson talk a little bit about his experience. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matz Jarlsson. I was born and raised in Sweden. I have an engineering degree from Sweden in electronics. And as Sam was saying, my contact with, or my first interest with traffic signals was when my wife ran a red light camera at the intersection. And she got a citation. That ticket is paid for. But I was interested in finding out more about traffic signals, and I discovered several problems. One, for instance, is when we are making turns. The traffic equations, this equation used for the signals are not accounting for the extra time needed for when we make turns. Another one is when we are stopping on a grade for an intersection. It wasn't implemented properly in 1982. And so I took some of these ideas to the board, and instead of embracing these ideas and trying to find a solution to educate engineers here in Oregon, they started to fine me or saying I was illegal, I could not state that I'm an engineer. And to me, I feel it's a civil rights to be able to say that I'm an engineer, and there should be freedom to say anything I want, talking about traffic signals. And it's imperative in my mind that we can share ideas freely here in Oregon, so we can promote innovation. And if the board will get their ways, they suppress that right. It's very important that we can share ideas in this case.
So those are our prepared remarks. We're happy to
After challenging red light cameras, Oregon man fined $500 for practicing engineering without a license. Anyone should be allowed to talk about the traffic signals without being penalized, says Mats Jarlstrom. He's suing the board. Eric Boehm, April 26, 2017, 9:40 a.m. When Mats Jarlstrom's wife got snagged by one of Oregon's red light cameras in 2013, he challenged the ticket by questioning the timing of the yellow lights at intersections where cameras had been installed. Since then, his research into red light cameras has earned him attention in local and national media. In 2014, he presented his evidence on an episode of 60 Minutes and an invitation to present at last year's annual meeting of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It also got him a $500 fine from the Oregon State Board of Examiners for Engineering and Land Surveying. According to the board, Jarlstrom's research into red light cameras and their effectiveness amounts to practicing engineering without a license. No, really. Jarlstrom had sent a letter to the board in 2014 asking for the opportunity to present his research on how two short yellow lights were making money for the state by putting the public's safety at risk. I would like to present these facts for your review and comment, he wrote. Instead of inviting him to present, the board threatened him. Citing state laws that make it illegal to practice engineering without a license, the board told Jarlstrom that even calling himself an electronics engineer and the use of the phrase "I am an engineer" in his letter were enough to create violations. Apparently the threats weren't enough, because the board followed up in January of this year by officially fining Jarlstrom $500 for the supposed crime of practicing engineering without being registered. Jarlstrom is now suing the state board over that fine, arguing that it's unconstitutional to prevent someone from doing math without the government's permission. He's getting support from the Institute for Justice, a national libertarian law firm. Criticizing the government's engineering isn't a crime, it's a constitutional right, said Sam Gage, an attorney at the Institute for Justice, in a statement. Under the First Amendment, you don't need to be a licensed lawyer to write an article critical of a Supreme Court decision, you don't need to be a licensed landscape architect to create a gardening blog, and you don't need to be a licensed engineer to talk about traffic lights. The notion that it's somehow illegal for Jarlstrom to call himself an engineer is absurd. He has a degree in electrical engineering from Sweden, worked as an airplane camera mechanic in the Swedish Air Force, and has worked in a variety of technical jobs since immigrating to the United States in 1992. In Oregon, though, all that matters is whether he has a state-issued license. As crazy as Jarlstrom's story is, it's not the first time the Oregon State Board of Examiners for Engineering and Land Surveying has been overly aggressive about enforcing their rules for who is and who is not an engineer. According to the lawsuit, the state board investigated Portland City Commissioner Dan Saltzman in 2014 for publishing a campaign pamphlet that mentioned Saltzman's background as an environmental engineer. Saltzman has a bachelor's degree in environmental and civil engineering from Cornell University, a master's degree from MIT's School of Civil Engineering, and is a membership of the American Society of Civil Engineers. What he isn't, though, is a licensed engineer in the state of Oregon. According to Jarlstrom's lawsuit, the board spent more than a year investigating Saltzman's background before voting to issue an official warning against using the word engineer incorrectly. In another case, the state board investigated a Republican gubernatorial candidate for using the phrase "I'm an engineer and a problem solver" in a campaign ad. The candidate in question, Alan Alley, had a degree in engineering from Purdue University and worked as an engineer for Boeing, and, of course, wasn't trying to lie about his lack of an Oregon-issued license but merely was making a freaking campaign ad. But it doesn't stop there. In 2010, the state board issued a $1,000 fine for illegally practicing engineering to a local activist who told the La Pine, Oregon, City Council that a proposed new power plant would be too loud for nearby residents. The board once investigated Portland Monthly magazine for running a story that described a young immigrant woman as an engineer behind Portland's newest bridge. The woman in the story did not describe herself as an engineer, but the magazine's editors included that description in the headline, the board concluded. Jarlstrom's lawsuit isn't seeking any monetary damages. He only wants a judicial order telling the state board to stop violating the free speech rights of Oregonians. Anyone should be allowed to talk about the traffic signals if they're too long or too short or anything without being penalized, Jarlstrom says.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I wanted to explain what fair use is. You can use pieces of news articles if you're doing it for news reporting, you have commentary, and you're doing it for education purposes. So that's what fair use is, as you can see right here. Another reason why I wanted to make this video is to let you know I have just joined with Patreon. A nice thing with Patreon, I make no money on YouTube. They took the money away years ago, and so this is another way to give, and it's a nice thing too because you can give monthly. You can give $1, $5, $10, whatever. I do 4 to 5 hours a day on trying to wake the sheeple up on how corrupt it is and different ways that you can fight the corruption. So Patreon is a way that you can do it, and then of course the old way is still there. Donate to Charlotte County COPWATCH with PayPal or credit card. So keep that in mind. 4 to 5 hours a day. I make no money, but the corruption happened to me and I'm sick of it, so I'm trying to wake people up. But my wife would love it if if we could get some help out there. There's 47,000 subscribers. Just think if each one of you subscribers just gave let's say actually yes, $1 a month. 47,000 subscribers gave $1 a month. That would be awesome. That's not going to happen. But anyways, that would be great if it did happen. But do the math in your head. Just think about it. Like I said, 4 to 5 hours a day. I get no money from YouTube. YouTube has gone nuts. You can't do anything anymore. They're taking the money away everywhere. So these are a couple different ways that you can still help out with all this time that I put in. And as you know, I'm in a special situation where, at least I can do it. 4 to 5 hours a day. We have a cleaning company during the day. That's what allows me to do this, and we're debt free. So this is my hobby. I don't go fishing and all that other crap. I try to save the world. So help me out to make the wife happy, man. In fact, if you guys did give $1 a day, and there was 47,000 of you, and you did it, and each of you gave $1, and that was every month, oh my God, yes, I could quit. I could start suing them. Another idea too that we have is if I got some funds, we could actually contact everyone that has been ticketed and or arrested and put in jail and start sending them postcards to let them know we're here and to see if everything went all right, and if it didn't, find out their story. So we could even do more investigations and more lawsuits. Lawsuits take money. So just think about that. You know, 47,000 of you so far right now. You know, $1 a day. I mean, $1 a month on Patreon, or $5 a month Patreon, 10, 20, whatever. Just do the math in your head. Help out. This is a lot of work every single day. Thanks.